All right, welcome back, everyone. If you joined us for our presentation just an hour ago here at 10, we're happy to have you here with us at 11 for Texas A&M's Virtual Campus Sustainability Month. So today we have Kendall here with us today, and she's an intern in the Office of Sustainability, and she's going to be talking to us about endangered species and how they have been impacted by COVID-19. So that's definitely a topic I haven't seen discussed anywhere. So I'm excited to see what Kendall has in store for us today. But before we get to Kendall, let me just do some quick housekeeping. So remember, if you want to view this, the best possible way is to put it in side-by-side mode on the bar. On the far right, there's a way for you to turn on side-by-side mode if you click on one of the buttons over there. You can also turn on your subtitles, so that's a great way to watch this if that's the way that you'd like to view this experience. Please keep your mics muted until the end. At the very end, we will have a Q&A with Kendall, and throughout her talk, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. We can ask Kendall those questions, and then once we get to that part of the presentation, you could use the raise your hand feature. I can call on you, or you could just unmute your mic and you could go ahead and you could talk. Or you could even show us your video if you want to have a conversation that way. So the more questions you have, the more robust that discussion is going to be. Also, the Sustainability Champion Awards are actually open. They open today. So if you know any students, faculty, or staff that are doing something to make campus more sustainable, please submit an application. They can all win an award. We have 3 awards that go out to students, faculty, and staff. And we have an internship program. Kendall is one of our current interns. Those applications are going to open on next Monday, October 26th. We'll put that in campus-wide email. We'll have it on our social media. We'll have it on our webpage. So if you're interested in being an intern for spring 2021, please submit your application. We'd love to have you join the team. And you might be here like we are here for the prizes. So you can win the cool water bottle, win one of these t-shirts. We have sizes in both colors. We have most sizes in both colors. And the way that you'll get that is there's going to be a code word during this presentation, and Kendall could speak it. I might drop it in the chat. Kendall might write it on a slide. If you paid attention to our last presentation at 10, Jessica actually wrote her code word on a slide. So we didn't speak it. I never said what it was. So you have to go back and check that out if you need that code word, but she has it written on one of the slides in the top right-hand corner. So each code word will be, each presentation will have 1 code word. 2 of them will get you a water bottle. 3 will get you a t-shirt of your choosing. 5 will get you a water bottle and a t-shirt. Once you have all the code words that you want, send them all in 1 email total to sustainability@tamu.edu. We'll reach out to you of how you can pick up your prize. You got to pick it up on the College Station campus, and you don't have to watch it live. You could watch the recorded copy that we have on our YouTube page. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Kendall is going to take it over. Kendall, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Ben. Okay, so as Ben said, my name is Kendall Sitzmann, and thank you so much for joining us for Virtual Campus Sustainability Month. And I am a senior environmental geosciences student. And yeah, I've been interning with the Office of Sustainability for 2 semesters now. So we're going to get into my presentation on how COVID-19 is actually impacting various endangered species. So first, I just wanted to give a brief overview of my presentation so you know what to expect. So first, we're going to be talking about just some background on endangered species and COVID-19, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Next, we're going to be talking about what evidence there is that animals actually can be impacted. And then we're going to get into if any endangered species actually have contracted COVID-19 yet. And lastly, we're going to talk about the future of different endangered species. So here's for the background. For instance, how many endangered species are there and how many people did COVID-19 even impact? So what is COVID-19? I don't think I have to go into this too much. I know COVID-19 has impacted everyone's lives in some way, but it is the most recent pandemic, and there's no reason to believe with all of this harmful effects it's had on humans that it can't reach wild animals potentially. And what is an endangered species? So an endangered species is just a species that was collected by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and they keep track of how many numbers are in the wild of just various species throughout the world, and they classify them based on how many are left in the world. So for instance, threatened is the least possible classification. Not every animal has to be on this list, by the way. that would just mean they're not even at risk. For instance, dogs and cats are not going to be on this list. But threatened, vulnerable, and then endangered are the ones that are most at risk and least numbered. So I wanted to show a brief video just about why we should care about endangered species. It's about 2.5 minutes, so it's not going to take long, but I thought it would be nice to hear from professionals.
What people forget is that we are on a little ball floating in a very dark, hostile, scary space, you know. And we're all, if you like, earthlings on this little planet. And to me, those animals have every right to exist on this planet, and to watch, you know, to just see them disappear is an absolute tragedy. And it's probably, you know, one of the worst things that can ever do, you know, to just snub out a form of life, a species that's evolved over hundreds of thousands of years just because of our short-termism. So its right to exist is paramount. You know, we should cherish these as the ultimate treasures of the planet.
You know, every life is only possible because of the diversity of life on Earth anyway, and nature doesn't do redundancy. You know, if something's redundant in an ecosystem, it generally doesn't last very long. There's been an awful lot of natural selection to get us to the point we are now already. There's more chance of that natural selection being able to protect or keep the right things in the right places if there's more diversity to start with. You know, reducing any amount of species, reducing any amount of animals, or removing populations is only going to make this a weaker planet. It's only going to make the resources weaker for the people who depend on it and the animals that depend on it.
If we look at this planet that we live on, this ball floating around, it's got this fantastic regulated system that regulates the climate, the water, the air, all these things that we take for granted. But the nuts and the bolts of the system are the species within it. Pied tamarins, for example, the black-lined tamarin, the fish, they're all part of the machine that keeps us on this habitable planet. So if we start chucking away the nuts and bolts and they start disappearing, ultimately, you know, from a selfish point of view, that's going to have an impact on us. You know, it's going to have a massive impact on us. So from an altruistic point of view about the beauty and the wonder of the planet, yes, these animals have to survive. But also from a selfish point of view, we have to have these animals and these species on the planet. We are intrinsically linked, our futures are intrinsically linked, and we've got to grow up and just recognize that fact, because we're just fooling ourselves and robbing future generations of humans who live on this planet if we don't stop and think now.
Okay, I like that video a lot just because he goes into how species are the nuts and the bolts, and I really like that analogy. So that's why
what people forget.
Okay. So next, I wanted to get into a little bit of comparisons so that we can compare like how it's impacted humans versus endangered animals. So over 36 million people were diagnosed with COVID-19 in the world. That was updated earlier this month. I'm sure it's a little more now. But of that population, 2.93% of people actually passed away. And there are over 41,000 species on the IUCN Red List that I spoke about earlier. So just to compare, if 2.93% of the species were eliminated, we would actually lose 1,201 species, which would be detrimental to biodiversity. So if coronavirus were to reach numerous species on this red list, possibly even more, the pandemic would be the most recent cause for mass extinction, which would also be detrimental to biodiversity and drastically change the world and the ecosystems. So next, I wanted to get into some evidence. For instance, maybe you haven't seen any animals with COVID-19, and maybe you don't think humans are even that related to animals. So 40% of the species that may be susceptible to COVID-19 are listed as at least threatened by the IUCN. So that means they could be threatened, vulnerable, or endangered. And just to like break that down a little further, so say you're standing in a room and you have 100 species in front of you, one of each, that means 40 of them, 100 species that are susceptible to COVID-19, that means at least 40 of them are listed as at least threatened, vulnerable, or endangered. So almost half. So the risk is predicted to decrease the more a species' ACE2 receptor differ from humans. So an ACE2 receptor is just the main cellular receptor for a virus on humans. We all have them. It's just the way you get the flu is this receptor. I don't want to like get too scientific about it, so I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So the ACE2 is found on many different areas like your nose, your mouth, and your lungs, That's why during flu season, it's advised you're not touching your face because you have a lot of receptors in your mouth, and your ears, your nose, all of that kind of things. So in humans, there are 25 amino acids in your ACE2 protein that are important for the virus to bind and gain entry to your cells. So just to bring that to the animal population, that would mean that animals that have all of those same 25 amino acid structures that match ours are at the highest risk for contracting the disease. So just to get into a few examples, a study was done by the University of California, Davis on which animals these would be that have those 25 same amino acid receptors as us. So very low risk would be the American alligator, the California sea lion, and the house mouse. They just completely differ from us, so that's why they're down there. And then low risk is dogs, horses, and pigs. And this actually kind of surprised me because these are more domesticated animals. So in my assumption before doing all of this research, I assumed that domesticated animals would have a higher risk just because they have more contact with humans. But since they're domesticated, they just have completely different genomic framework. So that's why they're a low risk. And then getting into medium risk, we have cats, cattle, sheep, and the Siberian tiger. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the high risk. So that would be the Western lowland gorilla, the Sumatran orangutan, the northern white-cheeked gibbon, Chinese hamsters, gray whales, and everyone's favorite, the bottlenose dolphin. So I starred the top 3 in the high risk because these are actually listed as critically endangered on IUCN's red list. And as you can see, they're primates, and that is something that's sort of general knowledge that we have very common genomic framework with primates. And if you're following along for the prize competition, the code word on this slide is red list. So to get into animals impacted, for instance, which animals have already been impacted and what other animals are potentially in danger? So I'm sure many of you may have heard about what happened at the Bronx Zoo earlier this spring, but 5 tigers and 3 lions at the Bronx Zoo actually tested positive after coming in contact with an asymptomatic zookeeper. And when I say test positive, it wasn't like they showed symptoms and it was a suspicion. They tested their stool samples and they did come back positive. So the symptoms they showed were coughing, sneezing, and a low appetite. And it came as a huge surprise to CDC because you would think the first exotic animals that would be showing symptoms or testing positive would be primates because they have such a close genomic framework with us, but it was actually these big cats. And the tigers at the Bronx Zoo are actually Malayan and Amur tigers, which are both listed as endangered. And the lions that they have at the Bronx Zoo are listed as threatened. So now all of the animals are recovered, which is fantastic news. But yeah, it's a risk that definitely shouldn't have been taken. And I wish we didn't have to know that they could test positive. So what is the fate for these endangered animals? So humans definitely need to take precaution around these, especially those that are threatened, in order to keep their species alive. I know the daily person doesn't come in contact with wild animals, but I just think you should be especially careful during this pandemic when you're going to zoos or going on vacations and coming in contact with any animals like that. So while we can't ask this cute monkey in the left corner to wear that mask, and we can't ask the tigers to stay 6 feet apart, it would be awesome to, but humans definitely need to take on that responsibility and be extremely cautious around them. And it should also be considered that we should eliminate contact with wild or zoo animals in order to protect them from contracting the virus. So just to get into a conclusion a little bit and reiterate some of the best points, animals in captivity are the most at risk. So this is different than domesticated animals. As I said, domesticated animals have a very low risk of getting the disease. That would be like your dogs and your cats and farm animals. But animals in captivities, what I mean by that is exotic animals like zoo animals, big cats, primates, things like that, not things you would find in a typical home. And so primates, big cats, and bats are the most susceptible. So bats, I put them on this list because it's believed by some that the virus originated from a bat. So if it did, there's no reason to believe that it can't be passed to humans and then back to bats. So a person should definitely not come in contact with wild animals. That should kind of be common knowledge, but just please keep your distance, especially during this time. And the CDC is still researching effects on other species. And I know Texas A&M is actually researching effects on domesticated animals, some of our favorites like dogs and cats. So I'm excited to see when that information comes out. And it's very important that a mass extinction is avoided in order to preserve biodiversity and the ecosystem. And these are my references.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kendall.
Mhm.
Thanks for that presentation. Great job. So just thinking about endangered species and COVID-19, it's a very unique topic. How did you come to want to research this topic?
So actually, I heard about the Bronx Zoo and it made me very interested. So I just wanted to know kind of what other animals would be at risk. So when I saw that, I was surprised that I guess even like an asymptomatic person would be able to transfer it to something so different than humans. So that was my interest.
So have you seen have we seen any other animals that are getting impacted by this, or is it more? Do you think it has something to do with maybe there isn't enough research, or
There definitely isn't a lot of research on it. It's a very new topic, but I know the Bronx Zoo happened at kind of the end of March, early April. And after that, zookeepers started to implement normal social distancing strategies. Before that, it was just kind of like they're at work with animals. Like, you feed them, you do all of those things. You don't need to worry about wearing a mask or wearing any of that. So, specifically at the Bronx Zoo, after those animals tested positive, they started sterilizing cages and they were wearing actually, rather than just masks, they were wearing hazmat suits in order to just prevent any sort of transfer possible. So I think that could also be another reason that we haven't seen more exotic animals testing positive.
so is that something like a change that has happened like at the majority of zoos that they're kind of like wearing masks and protective equipment, or is
Yes,
that more just at the Bronx Zoo?
once the Bronx Zoo happened, more mass or more um, zoos became aware of what was going on and seeing that they need to be implementing those strategies as well, especially the San Diego Zoo. I know they were big in that too. But yeah, it's great that they're learning from each other.
So then when you said that at the Bronx Zoo that they I can't remember exactly what you said that they did there. Oh, they wore hazmat suits.
Mhm.
Is that something that you only saw at the Bronx Zoo, or did you see that at the other zoos as well, like the San Diego Zoo?
I did only see that at the Bronx Zoo. I think that may have also been to prevent the tigers from spreading it to other zookeepers because they still
That makes
obviously
sense.
needed to be fed and needed to be taken care of. And vets were in and out of that enclosure as much as possible because everyone was so surprised.
So I know feel like I did see some research that at least that it's possible for dogs to be infected. Have you seen like how many cases that we've seen from that?
I haven't seen a specific number of cases, and it's definitely possible. I just had it on the low risk because it's not going to be common. Like everyday house pets don't have much to worry about, but definitely don't be um, what's the word? I guess ignorant. If you have COVID-19, it's not going to be the best time for you to be cuddling and kissing your dog and things like that, just to protect them.
Okay, cool. All right, and then we do have a question in the chat. What part of the stool sample provided indication of a positive test for COVID-19, and what were the testers looking for? If you have any insight into that.
A little bit. So at the Bronx Zoo, once they were showing symptoms and then the zookeeper actually tested positive, they couldn't use just a normal human sample on big cats like that. So they couldn't nose swab them. They couldn't like take their spit or anything like that. All I know is that they worked for a couple weeks and they did develop something to where they could test their stool. And it was specifically for COVID. So it wasn't like the stool test was just to see if um, there was a virus. It was a specific COVID animal test developed that did indicate a positive, if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, so I think that makes good sense.
Mhm.
So I guess like kind of like a takeaway for me on this. Oh, she did say cool, thank you. So it does sound like you did answer her question. So a takeaway for me is, oftentimes like as we're going kind of through the pandemic here, maybe we'll go outside and we'll get kind of lax and take our masks off. So has this made you kind of think of differently about mask wearing when you're outside, especially like if you're in nature?
Personally, I wear a mask while I'm outside still. That's just my personal choice. But I know some people choose not to just because they're distanced and we're not in an enclosed environment. But definitely, it has made me see like looking at animals as if it were a human. Like I'm still going to be 6 feet apart from them. If I do come closer, I'm wearing a mask. And if I touch them, I'm sanitizing before and after just to be precautionary because there's no reason to think that that couldn't be the chance that it transfers.
So do you think, like, in the same token, maybe, it's unlikely that we might run into contact with wild animals, but we know that there's a possibility that domesticated animals, even though it's very low, do you also take some precautions when you're interacting with other people's pets or your own pets, such as hand washing or whatever it might be?
Yes, I do. Like, definitely for sure, wash your hands all the time. And it would be my best advice personally just to not go to the zoo during this because you never know, another zoo animal could have it, or you could potentially be asymptomatic and give it to a zoo animal. And that would just be perfectly avoided if we were to not see those enclosures at the time.
So would you say it's a good idea, like even if you have your own pet at home, like when you come home from the day to, like, wash your hands before you interact with your pet physically?
Yes. And I know we all love holding our dogs and cats super close and hugging them and sleeping next to them at night and things like that. And you can't ask your dog to stay 6 feet from you, but just try your hardest to make sure you're being as precautionary as you are with your neighbors and your family.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Kendall. So I think that's all the questions that we have in the chat. Thanks for that. I think it's really important for us to think not just about how other people are impacted, but also animals, and just the fact that we share this world with a lot of other different species, and we have a responsibility to all take care of each other. So I think that was really interesting, and just a whole kind of different way to think about this. And sometimes people get really influenced by what happens with animals or their pets, and they sometimes care more about their pets than other people. So perhaps this kind of knowledge is going to help people to make better, safer choices for everyone. So thank you for that, Kendall. And before I go on, I just wanted to share the next slide here and show you what we have coming up next. But before I do that, is there anything that you wanted to conclude with, Kendall?
Just to make sure you're treating animals as if they were people as well, and be safe and wash your hands.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that, Kendall. All right, so let me just share my screen real quick and then show you what we have coming up next. So we have our next events are actually this Friday, October 23rd. Jenny's going to talk to us about fast fashion, and that's at 1 p.m. At 5 p.m., Paige is going to talk to us about the sustainability of disturbances. So please tune in on Friday and join us for those. And I also wanted to say that on Wednesday, we're going to be doing kind of a social media takeover. A lot of our campus partners have given us some information about what they're doing in terms of sustainability. So we'll post about that. We'll have little brief videos, and they'll be on Instagram and Facebook. It'll be all day Wednesday. So please check that out. Save the post, comment on the post, like the post, share the post. It's a great way for us to increase our engagement and continue to get the word out about sustainability and all the different ways that you can learn about it and be more sustainable in your personal life. So please join us on Friday. Please check us out on Wednesday. And again, thank you for joining us today. Have a good rest of your week. And Kendall, great job. Thanks again. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you, everybody.